Welcome back to Webcertain TV. I'm Gemma Houghton. Today I'm joined by Denise Law, who's head of social media at The Economist, to talk about how the magazine uses social to promote itself around the world and engage with an audience. Hi Denise.
Hi Gemma.
Thank you for being here. So, social media is a big part of The Economist digital strategy and how you kind of reach out to your audience. What are the key goals you have with your social activity?
Our main goal with social media at The Economist is to increase awareness and ultimately paid readership of The Economist across social media platforms.
And how do you then utilise these channels to kind of increase brand awareness and obviously engagement with your content?
Well, there are several ways we do that. The first way is we apply data to what we do. We work very closely with the data analysts, designers, developers, and people in very different departments to basically conceive ideas that are native for social media.
Okay. So have you got any examples of how you do that?
Well, recently we experimented a lot with Facebook Live Q&As, which we found reached much more people than a regular post. But also we've experimented a lot with social native content. So an example of a very successful format that we developed through collaboration with different teams is On This Day, which is basically a historical card that marks an important moment in history and offers our reader a really interesting fact or quote from someone famous and makes them feel really smart in that moment in time. We also have made our espresso quotes quite popular and shareable on social media, and we've experimented a lot recently with Mythbusters, where we present a myth and we bust that. So that was really popular during Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet that was quite an interesting time for you and a lot of discussions going on. So you mentioned, Facebook Q&A there. You mentioned this kind of content, but obviously there are a lot of social channels and they're all quite different. So how do you tailor the kind of type of content you put out for the different social channels?
So the social media team's role isn't just about distributing and broadcasting our journalism to the world. There's a huge tailoring and adaptation element.
Yeah.
So what we do is we approach each platform very differently. What works on Facebook may not necessarily work on Instagram or on Twitter.
Yeah.
So the first thing we did was we conducted an audit. We asked our data scientists to look at all of our different social media channels to basically help us to better understand where we were underperforming relative to the time and energy that we spent on that platform. And what he immediately revealed from the data was that we were wasting a lot of energy churning tweets for Twitter sub-accounts that were reaching next to nothing in terms of tweets and retweets and engagement and traffic. So what we then decided to do was to reallocate resources towards Facebook, towards Line, an Asian messaging app, as well as LinkedIn. And by doing that, we were able to get much more bang for our buck by focusing and prioritizing specific platforms.
Okay, so just to pick up on there, you mentioned Line, which I think is very interesting. A lot of people may not have heard of it, but for targeting markets in Asia like Japan or Thailand, it's, absolutely key. So how do you approach the fact that in international markets there are so many different social media sites that go beyond Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and how do you make sure that you're present in the right places?
The reason we were really interested in Line is because it gives us access to markets that we traditionally don't have a big presence in. Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and South Korea are some of our most active markets online. What's beautiful about the app is that you don't just communicate with your friends on it in the same way that you do on WhatsApp. You can also buy things, you can pay for stuff, you can download games. It's an all-inclusive app, and news is one element of that user experience.
So people will be in that app doing a whole range of things rather than purely going there for one specific intention.
Exactly. And what's really great about Line is it enables you to push content in two different ways. One is via push notification, like me sending you a text message. And the second way is to post more timeless content on a homepage. And that's what makes it quite distinctive from other chat apps.
So that's content that will stay there all the time that people can find, so it's not just it's there and it's gone straight away. It lets you kind of develop a bit more of a core presence.
Line is an example of a platform where we have really tailored our content for it. A lot of what we produce online doesn't exist on Facebook. It doesn't exist on Twitter. Line has a very different audience. Basically, our approach to it is to explain the world in bite-sized messages. Our assumption is that a lot of people who use Line speak English as a second or third language, so we have to be really careful about the way we communicate our journalism on the platform.
So all of your communication is in English?
It's in English, but it's much simpler. We don't use as many puns, which is what The Economist is known for. We focus a lot on resurfacing and promoting Asia-focused content.
Yeah.
And we also have done a lot of experimentation around audio clips.
Yeah, which is an audio and video particularly are both things that are quite popular in Asian markets, perhaps more than in Europe, for example. So it's about understanding how people like to engage with their content.
I think one of the biggest lessons we learned with Line is to better understand the audience and the market. I know quite a few publishers who've decided to be online and they apply the exact same strategy that they have on Twitter, on Facebook. They carbon copy the stuff and they stick it onto Line and it doesn't work. Our mission online is to be an authoritative voice in markets where local news organizations can't be trusted. So the Economist really has an opportunity to be, the global voice on global issues.
So again, the great thing with that is, identifying that there is a gap for that. They're identifying that there's an interest for that, and you're kind of using those channels to make sure that people in those markets are aware of you, where perhaps using other channels, they wouldn't necessarily come across you quite so easily.
Exactly. I think people online use it differently than they do on Facebook. So it really serves a very different function.
And obviously, you said subscriptions and actually paid for subscriptions are what, keeps The Economist going. So people love to consume content online, but they're not always that kind of comfortable paying for it, and they expect to get it for free. So how do you use social to kind of generate actually paid subscriptions once you've hooked them in?
60% of our users online have never heard of The Economist before. So our short-term goal online is to build awareness and to warm them up. We don't expect to generate significant subscriptions from Line yet in the same way that we do from Twitter and Facebook. Mm-hmm. We expect to basically build awareness, build loyalty, and to build a sense of trust. Over time, we might consider exploring different ways of serving them a subscription offer that might be tailored for them. Yeah. But in the short term, it's really about getting them engaged with our content.
And again, another thing about social. It can't, it's not always. It's difficult sometimes to justify the spend on it, to justify the investment, because there's no immediate return on investment. However, it is a kind of slow burn. It's about building people up. It's about making sure that they're aware of you and not expecting results immediately.
It's about the halo effect as well. Social media is about brand awareness, and brand awareness is really important. Yes, you can't measure it now, but our data actually shows that someone is more likely to subscribe to The Economist once they've sampled a breadth of our journalism in a variety of formats. And social media plays a really important role in allowing us to do that. And people are also more likely to subscribe after 6 interactions with The Economist, and social could be one of those. So it might not necessarily lead to an immediate ROI, but over the long term, we hope to see the impact of social media.
As we mentioned, social media is really about engagement, and it's not just pushing out your content. It's about getting people interested. It's about developing a bit of a relationship. So what tactics do you use to actually engage on social? How do you build those relationships with users?
You're absolutely right. So we measure our success against 3 main metrics: reach, traffic, and engagement. It's all well and good to reach a lot of globally curious people, which is our target audience, and it's fantastic if we can even bring them into our ecosystems. But we also want to engage with them. What does that mean? Do they like our content? Do they share it? Do they talk about it? Do they do something with it? Engagement is highly correlated with adoption of a product. So if we can find different ways of spurring them to do something with our content, we hope that they will eventually subscribe. So some examples of things we do to engage with our audience are simple. We do a lot of polls. We ask them specific provocative questions on Twitter, for example. On Facebook, we've been experimenting a lot with Facebook Live, which has been a fantastic way of not only giving our journalists a bit of personality on screen, but also allowing our audiences to ask questions in real time. We also have experimented a bit with debates on our own platforms. But you're absolutely right. One of the biggest challenges we face right now as a social media team is a lot of the engagement we drive is on other people's platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Line. Yeah. The goal that I have for the team is trying to figure out a way where we can drive that engagement on our own platforms. How do we create a journey where people can engage with us on Facebook and then also engage with us on economist.com or on our apps?
Yeah, and it's very much about the whole kind of digital ecosystem working really well together. You can't look at social as a separate channel or a separate entity entirely, because you need to tie that in. So how closely do you work? You mentioned obviously you work with the data analysts and developers to understand how people are using it. How much do you work with kind of other digital marketing elements of The Economist to make sure that you're all going in the same direction?
Well, there's a lot of evangelism that takes place internally, so I'm a bit of a cheerleader.
Yeah.
So I work very closely, as you said, with the data analysts, but also with the developers and the designers, so that we put our readers at the heart of everything we do.
Yeah.
When you align your goals around better serving the paying customer, then already you're kind of halfway there.
Yeah.
Then it's just about executing on the idea.
Yeah. And it's very important that the people at the heart of, the design, like you say, really understand what, information you're getting from the readers, because that's obviously going to help them in terms of what they're doing and not just work based on their own, research or their own opinion. So it's very important. And you also, talked about measurement and the fact that, brand awareness, you can't really measure easily and it's not necessarily always quantifiable, but obviously with anything, you need to be able to measure somehow the success of it. So what are the kind of main things you measure, and how do you measure when you're active on social?
So the main 3 metrics we look at are reach, traffic, and engagement. I see our role as quite different from marketing because we sit in editorial. We're very much focused on expanding the top end of the funnel, casting our net as wide as possible among these globally curious types on the platforms where they spend their time, warming them up and bringing them into our ecosystem. It's marketing's role to then convert them into paying subscribers.
Okay, so it's more just basically giving the rest of the marketing teams maybe the audience in which to target. You're kind of, like you say, casting that net and bringing them in the first place.
We also work very closely with marketing to provide them with audience insight and suggestions on the type of editorial content that engages a lot with our readers on social media.
Yeah.
And then it's their job to decide whether it's worth putting additional spend behind it.
Any final tips you could give, for any business who is using social really to do this, to drive audience awareness, to drive engagement? What are the really important things they should be doing?
The main tips that I would give any business today that wants to have an effective social media strategy is, first, identify the problem that you are trying to solve and then build a strategy around solving that problem. For us, our problems are lack of awareness and misconceptions about what we offer. So our social media strategy is very much about addressing those problems. The second one is befriend your data analytics team. They can do so much for you and provide you with data that can help you make better decisions. Sometimes the data will hurt your feelings, but that's just the way it is. Yeah. You're just going to have to figure out a way where you can use the data to help you ruthlessly prioritize. And the third one I would say is to experiment, to get stuff done. Gone are the days where you spend a lot of time in hour-long meetings trying to get the perfect idea, but you never end up executing on it. The only way to find out if something works on a social media platform is to try and to experiment and to iterate if it doesn't work.
Great. Thank you so much. Really interesting to talk to you today, Denise.
Great. Thank you for the time.